to come to our second to last part of the peace wave. For the next 2 hours, we are moving slightly more westward. To begin, we will start still in South Asia, and then we will move to West Asia, also known by many as the Middle Eastern region, and we will also include some contributions from Eastern Africa as well. So our first part of the program for this segment will be coming from India. We have a clip where IPB board member Bina Lakshmi Nipram will explain a little bit of what is going on in these days in the Manipur region. Please note this video is a couple weeks old, so the events there are very fast moving, but still we hope this will give you some insights into a conflict that is not being talked about enough in this moment, and open our eyes to what we need to do to restore peace in Manipur, Northeast India.
The Global Alliance have been mapping things on the ground on minute by minute, literally minute by minute. So we have some findings, and we will just share that in 2 minutes, and then we will give the floor to the speakers from the ground. So allow me to screen share. Yes. So Manipur in flames, what is happening as of what happened till yesterday. The conflict currently, for some of you, of course, let me go through the map. So the region of the world we are talking about is this region called the northeast of India, which is all in colors, but Manipur, the one in blue, is where the epicenter of the violence is. Just for others, there are 45 million people living in this region. Manipur alone, about close to 3 million. Look at this diversity. So what is happening right now is not just between two ethnic communities, but it is the weaponization of our identities. Look at the number of indigenous cultures, people, languages. It should be a national geographer's paradise. But such a diverse, rich part of the world being literally put in flames in this part of the world, which is the world's largest democracy. What is also very critical is that this is a very important geostrategic area. The Northeast shares borders with China, Myanmar, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal. And so this is the geostrategic nature. This is the area where the first oil of India was dug. If you enjoy Assam tea or Earl Grey tea, it comes from this region near in Sikkim, Darjeeling. Assam tea, which is the English breakfast tea, is not even English. It comes from Assam in this part of the world. Just to let you know how this region has much of the forest cover left in India, a region of immense resource, a region rich with people and cultures and religion, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and right now attempts are made to weaponize the identities of each and every one. This is a problem in Manipur right now, just to give a context. So two ethnic communities are supposed to be fighting, the Kukis and the Meiteis right now. And so everybody says Kukis and Meiteis. Beyond that, they don't see that Manipur is also home to 30 plus other smaller indigenous groups, which are at the forefront of this conflict. So this conflict erupted, has been simmering for a while, but I'll just tell you what happened in the last couple of weeks. Over 150 people have been killed. Now, we can't even document more because many of the bodies have been burned to ashes. You can't even count how many died. Look at the homes. This is a phenomena of burning homes after homes. 7,750 homes burned down. 53,000 displaced. Believe this is all happening in the last 3 to 4 weeks. There are 314 refugee camps set up. This is all happening in Manipur, a tiny state amongst all the colorful states you've seen. Only in that blue state, this is happening. 35,000 troops deployed, more have come in the last 48 hours. 221 churches have been destroyed, 17 temples burned. But what is also critical is for many indigenous people, in that 7,750 homes, every home in an indigenous region has, because many indigenous people don't have churches or temples. For them, their home, their deity is in their home. So when you burn their home, it also burns your spiritual, way. It burns that part of your life, your community, which also, we can count churches and temples, but there are so many indigenous homes where the spiritual way of life literally has been burned down. Who will count that? Hundreds injured. Many districts remain under curfew. Internet has been banned since 3rd of May. Imagine. So we will never know the true number of deaths, but it is happening right now. And as I mentioned, the region is very, very critical. This is just to show the different ethnic diversity. So the conflict right now is supposed to be between the Kukis, which is here on the left, and the Meiteis, which is on the right. But then it's much more than what it is projected to be. The roots of the conflict, many will tell, has been the trigger of the Meitei people wanting a scheduled tribe status, because Meiteis are, what is a scheduled tribe status? Again, all of these are what I call, Quijano would call, a Latin American scholar would call the coloniality of power. The British use terms like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe to divide the different, to rule. It's like in the United States, federally recognized tribe and non-federally recognized tribes. So it is a coloniality of power. And as a result, for example, this could be taken out by the Indian Parliament anytime to say all Indians are all Indians, So, and then, because of, we are recognized, because when you're recognized, you're given certain measures. When you're not recognized, you don't get those benefits. So there is a tussle now going on that this may benefit some communities. It is, so all of these triggers, again, our experts are here to explain. The violence also have ramifications of what's happening in Burma. Let us not forget, because from Burma, according to the UN, this is a UN thing, that more than 53,000 refugees have come into Mizoram and Myanmar. So what is happening in Burma is also impacting, because some of the tensions in Manipur started with calling the Kuki community as refugees. Again, according to the Refugee Convention, which India is a signatory, it is critical for India to now really ensure that it signs this so that it makes it clear if there are, because people are fleeing wars, and it's the duty of nation states and communities to help those who are fleeing, but to such an extent that they are properly identified and then they are given support they need from the government side. That clarity is not there. As a result, so much of fear in Manipur that they will be inundated. So again, the fear psychosis generated has been one of the triggers of this conflict. What is really painful, and we have been shattered, shocked beyond words to see what has been happening. Look at the number of Meitei homes and Kuki homes. Again, these are homes not belonging to the rich and the warmongers. These are homes belonging to the poorest of the poor in the periphery. Village after village of both Meitei and Kuki homes been burned down. In Churachandpur, all this, again, it's the details are there. We are finalizing the report, which we will share as and when it is done. So there has been so many war crimes and atrocities. The Global Alliance have traced 11 cases of sexual violence since the violence erupted. And then again, we are looking towards dangerous fissures amongst ethnic lines have been created in Manipur right now. And we must work towards ensuring that we are able to give space for grieving and begin peace talks immediately. So these are some of the things that the Global Alliance have done to just put down the layers of the context of what's happening. With this, I'm going to immediately jump on and give it to Tamo Dhiren Sadokpam. I know families very close to my own family. Meitei men married to Kuki men married to Meitei, Naga men, all are like, we are human beings in the end. We are all human beings, and no human being is illegal. Let us be very clear. No human being is illegal. Is there a way that we can work to ensure the concept of live and let live without killing each other like this, or made to kill each other? And as you rightly pointed out, that we need, I think, during all these weeks of violence, we, the indigenous women groups in Manipur, across ethnic groups, our communications didn't stop. We did not stop because we know this is not the first time violence has happened in Manipur. And we know that somebody, as we mentioned, it says this violence is engineered by people who are close to guns, drugs, and power. We know from day one on 3rd that this violence is engineered. And in the process, so many innocents have lost their lives in one of the most horrific atrocity ever committed on our people.
Many thanks to Bina. She could not join us live here. As you can imagine, she is doing a lot to work on the situation in Manipur at the moment. However, we're very glad to have that. Just again, as a note, if anyone joined us a little bit late, that recording is a few weeks old now. You will be able to find the whole recording of that webinar on our YouTube channel very soon. And if you want more information, you can find Bina as well on social media sites to hear all of the latest updates on what is happening in Manipur. We will now move to another recorded clip that we have explaining immediately after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the Taliban re-takeover of the country, some thoughts and ideas from Malalai Joya, who spoke a few years back at our World Peace Congress, the IPB World Peace Congress in Barcelona, and share some of the remarks of the situation in Afghanistan.
Dear friends, 20 years after the US launched their invasion and war, the people of my long-suffering country are right back where we started. After trillions of dollars spent and hundreds of thousands killed and displaced, the Taliban flag is once again flying over Afghanistan. As the youngest woman elected to Afghanistan's parliament back in 2005, my experience reflects the failure of the US and NATO for a policy that used women's rights as a pretext for occupation, but only managed to empower the most corrupt forces in our society. The rise and now the return of the Taliban and the ideological brothers of these extremists, such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and dozens of other terrorist organizations in Afghanistan, is the result of a decade of foreign intervention and corruption, which has turned the hope of life and a relatively bright future into a terrible nightmare for our defenseless compatriots. For 20 years now, I have given voice to my people's struggle for freedom, independence, prosperity, and social justice. And I have always been on the edge of protest against the jihadi Taliban fundamentalists and their bloodthirsty foreign masters. For more than 4 decades, these fundamentalists were mercenaries and creatures of the infernal organizations of the CIA, Mossad, MI6, WAWAC, SAWAC, and ISI, who killed our defenseless people and innocent people and drove people from their homes. The biggest treason of the US to the Afghan nation is the submission of Afghanistan to the Taliban through a shameful deal helped by the puppet regime of Ashraf Ghani. With this action and giving amnesty to the international recognition to the terrorist Taliban who are in the blacklist of the UN as wanted criminal in the name of peace agreement, US proved that once more that it has an inseparable bond with its lackeys. Dear friends, now once again, they brought Taliban to power under the name of a so-called peace. In fact, the history is repeated in Afghanistan again, and they disrespected and betrayed the values of democracy. This brutal war is far from over because a sinister dealing with a savage group armed and supported by foreign intelligence agencies will never bring peace. And I strongly believe peace without justice is meaningless. Looking back to the history, the US regime has committed war crimes, and they did so even in their last operation in Afghanistan, which caused the killing of many innocent Afghans, including women and children. Less than 2 months into this new Taliban regime, we can already see the brutality they will unleash against our people. Many of you know the bloodthirsty nature of Taliban, so there is no need to go into details. I have said many times in the past, and I repeat now, that Taliban has not changed, nor have they become moderate, soft-spoken, and human. In addition to the US and its nefarious interests, regional powers have long been interested in intervention of our country and wanted to occupy or control Afghanistan, especially China, Russia, Pakistan, and Iran. Each of these countries have their own specific strategic interests for their own benefits. Furthermore, countries like the UK, Germany, Turkey, Qatar, France, and many others have contributed to the instability of Afghanistan, pushing it back to dark ages for their own political, economical, and military interests. Women's rights under the Taliban regime are non-existent and will include torture, beating women with lashes, forced marriages, stoning to death, banning of music, and deprivation of a basic lifestyle, deprivation of education and jobs, and many more examples showing their misogynist and inhuman nature. A clear recent example is the woman covered from head to toe in black hijab at the University of Kabul and at the streets in Kunduz, Faryab, and Kabul, who blindly came on stage with the slogan, "Death to democracy and long live Emirat." Although the Taliban brutally prosecuted Negars, Razias, and dozens of other girls and women, they can never silence the call for women's liberation and equality. Widespread protests against the absurd and rotten ideology of the Taliban have begun with the presence of progressive and fearless women. These incredible displays of courage are a source of hope for further effective movement and the nationwide women's movement. Dear friends, the catastrophe has caused many men and women to be unemployed, and at the same time, inflation has risen, which will lead to extreme poverty. It is heartbreaking to see some families have even had to sell their beloved children or their kidneys or commit suicide because they could not feed their children. Respected friends, I have repeatedly emphasized that the only way to save Afghanistan and to get rid of this catastrophic situation is solidarity of the progressive, democratic, and secular forces. If we want to have an independent, democratic, and prosperous Afghanistan in which men and women have equal rights based on democracy, people need a strong solidarity to be free from fundamentalist and any foreign interventions. For 2 decades, I have been repeatedly saying that no nation can give liberation to another nation. Now I insist again that only nations can liberate themselves. Dear friends, Afghans are courageous and determined people, and even in these dark times for our country, we will find a new ways to be united and fight for our liberation. International solidarity and support are crucial at this time. Do not forget the women of Afghanistan just because the US and other NATO troops have gone home. We are more determined than ever to come together to make sure that one day the flag of our country will fly over an independent and free Afghanistan. I also want the international solidarity of the justice-loving and progressive movement, individuals, parties, activists around the world not to forget Afghanistan and join their hands with the progressive intellectuals and activists in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
And many thank you again to Malala for reminding us that simply because the US and NATO are out of Afghanistan, we cannot forget the people of Afghanistan and must continue to stand in solidarity with them. Now we will move on to a couple of live contributions, the first of which will come from Sharon Dolev, who is an IPB council member and also one of the leaders of the organization METO, or the Middle Eastern Treaty Organization. Sharon, I would like to give the floor to you to speak from no to how, achieving the possible. Hopefully something a little bit more positive looking here. So we're very much looking forward to hearing that.
Thank you very much, Sean, and to all of you that organized this amazing wave. I have to say I feel humbled speaking after hearing the speakers before me, but I don't have much time, so let's move to nuclear weapons. I don't know what is, if the topic of nuclear weapons was spoken before me on the wave, but just a tiny reminder. Right now, there are about 15,000 nuclear warheads around the world. 100, if detonated, even if in a small war, a local war, let's say between India and Pakistan, apart from the millions of deaths in India and Pakistan, putting aside radiation that will cover the earth. Just the climate change from cities burning will give us 70% less sun for at least 2 years and 10 years of nuclear winter, which will cause in the first 2 years 2 billion deaths just from hunger. Now, that's the bad news. Other bad news is that we were so close to nuclear war so many times. It's just that these kind of stories tend to come out only 2 decades, 3 decades after. So if a nuclear war almost started in the last decade, we will find out about it in 20 years. But if you look at Google and look for near miss, nuclear near miss, you'll see how many times we were that close to nuclear war. Now, we used to be afraid just from a war between the US and Russia, but now we know better. We know that even a tiny war will disrupt the world and humanity in a way that those who will survive, might be jealous of those who died on the first day. The good news is that only 9 states possess nuclear weapons. It means that the rest of the world, the rest of the states, either didn't want to, decided or were delving into it and then decided not to, and that since 1970, the Non-Proliferation Treaty has 197 member states in it, including 5 nuclear states, which mean India, sorry, not India, the US, Russia, England, France, and China. And outside the NPT, there are other 4 nuclear states. NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. So as an activist, if you want to get rid of nuclear weapons, and I really want to get rid of nuclear weapons, mainly because I think that mankind still have so much in it. We still have to grow and to learn. We're just in our diapers as a species. And it will be pity that 2 leaders, just 2 leaders, might, finish this thing that's called life on this planet, and they can. So if you want to get rid of nuclear weapons, I think that as an activist, you first have to look at your own state, especially if you come from a nuclear-armed state, such as Israel. So inside Israel, there is the policy of ambiguity, meaning we do not speak about nuclear weapons, we don't report about nuclear weapons unless it's about Iran. Iran, if you notice, is not a nuclear-armed state. Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. But Israel, as a nuclear armed state, is in a very special position where we can make threats without our people understanding that we made nuclear threats, because we really don't talk about it. It's a taboo. So when we started campaigning in Israel, the first thing that we needed to find out was, how do you even campaign about something that nobody wants to talk about? And one of the things we found out is that the research that came out in 2008 that showed what will happen if there will be a limited war, just like I described before, between India and Pakistan. What if only 100 small bombs the size of Hiroshima will detonate? What if one nuclear submarine, American nuclear submarine, will use the weapons on its board? It's the same result. No matter what, even if it's a very small war, everybody will suffer. It will be a global suffering, global hunger. So when you come with such information, even in Israel, people really do get it. People change their mind. People that didn't even want to talk about it can understand why we have to get rid of nuclear weapons. Yet in Israel, the problem is that unlike India and Pakistan, the US and Russia, Israel doesn't have a regional nuclear adversary. Israel is in a different position. Israel feels very isolated, small, tiny, surrounded by states that some don't even recognize its right to exist. Now, this is not about the occupation. This is just about nuclear weapons. So what I am trying to say here, that this conversation became very unhealthy. So on one hand, there are calls on Israel to get rid of nuclear weapons. On the other hand, Israel feels isolated and that nuclear weapons are its only reason to exist. How do you break this? And what we found out is that one of the best ways to tackle this is, on one hand, educate as many Israelis about the dangers of any nuclear war, about the fact that a nuclear war, even if Israel is using its weapons, I mean, it will be everybody on the planet, including us, that will suffer, and that any kind of nuclear arm race in the Middle East is something that Israel cannot tolerate, because Israel is that small, one bomb, one nuclear bomb, and we're done. So when you take all this and you look regionally, you can see that since 1970s, there have been calls for a weapon of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. Weapons of mass destruction means nuclear, chemical, and biological. However, this cause didn't involve Israel, the vast majority of it. So there were lots of states calling on Israel to do something when Israel is not even in the room. In 1995, there was even a resolution that called for a weapon of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. However, it happened at the NPT, at the Non-Proliferation Treaty. A treaty is only as strong as the states in it, like any agreement. So if there's an agreement between parties, and there's a party that is not part of this agreement, this agreement doesn't have any power on the party that is outside, meaning there were decisions making and there were resolutions that no one could really deliver. That created an atmosphere of impossible. So they were keep calling on Israel to get rid of nuclear weapons, and that didn't happen. They called on the weapon of mass destruction free zone, that didn't happen. But in 2018, there was a new resolution. And this resolution was also part of a very strong civil society push on finding what is possible. And that happened with civil society from several organizations joining together in order to find all the reasons for why people from the Middle East, Arabs, Iranians, and Israelis, even those who say that they support the idea of weapons of mass destruction free zone, on the second sentence will say that it's impossible. So the first thing that we found out in 2014, we started this kind of mapping the obstacles. We had roundtables in Israel, we had roundtables outside of Israel to sit with Arab diplomats and Iranian diplomats. We used UN gatherings in order to have meetings with diplomats. And as civil society, we started mapping the obstacles. When we finished mapping the obstacles, we realized that there are two columns. One column that says that it shows real technical problems on how to realize such a zone, when states don't talk to each other, when there's mistrust, when states can give up on the weapons, but they cannot trust that other states are not keeping the weapons. And remember, we're not just talking now about nuclear weapons, we're talking about chemical, we're talking about biological. And one of the things we kept hearing was that there were academia, members of the Arab League that tried to reach to a model and they couldn't. It's impossible. So when we mapped the obstacles and we saw some technical problems that needed solving, but the vast majority of the obstacles for such a zone came from actually not believing that it's possible. So the discourse created the impossibility in a way. One of the problems was that the discourse was hardly inside the Middle East. So while there were several roundtables and side events at each UN meeting, it was usually Europeans talking at the Middle East or about the Middle East with very little participation from the Middle East, which was one problem. The second problem was that so many states inside the region and outside the region also had something to gain from the impossible. So on one hand, they could call on things that couldn't happen, but had the right statement in their hands. And on the other hand, they didn't have to give up on anything. They could have the situation as is that probably is comfortable for states, but it's not healthy for us humans, keeping nuclear weapons. Now, when we realized that the obstacles are not as huge as they should be, we decided to try to find this model that the states and the academics and the think tanks that were dealing with the zone said was impossible. And we did one thing that I guess they didn't. We imagined that the states actually want to find a solution. When we just imagine that they want to find a solution, somehow from what was supposed to be kind of a skeleton of possibilities to a model, somehow we finish the first draft and we see that what we have is a model, because the only thing that was really making it impossible was understanding how much they don't want it. And if they don't want it, no model will work. But if you just imagine that they want to, you have a model. And how do we know, or how did we learn that we actually have a model and we're not fantasizing? We asked one of our colleagues, one of our partner organizations that is based in Britain, to send the model to all the Middle Eastern's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And when they saw something that they thought that was European made, and when they read the model, they actually liked it. They all sent back emails that actually liked the model. And then it allowed us at another UN gathering to book a room, to sit with our model in front of all those diplomats from these ministries and some European ministries, show them the model that they thought that came from Europe, and tell them, well, actually, this is one possible way that you all said you liked. Now we're working on other models, and we will not put our names on it. This is an open source, but one thing has to change. The one thing that has to change is that you can't say anymore that even a model is impossible, because there's already one possibility and we're producing a second one. Now we're into our fifth model that is very comprehensive. And the nice thing is that we've done it with the diplomats in closed rooms. We asked them to comment. We managed to get some roundtables where the diplomats from the zone actually sat in their own capacity, not representing the states, and making this text better, showing that there are so many possible ways to get to a weapon of mass destruction free zone if they want to. In 2018, Egypt proposed at the UN General Assembly, a resolution calls for a UN meeting, yearly meeting of the states in the zone to reach an agreed upon text, a treaty for the zone. The states that sit there will have to reach every understanding, every paper in consensus. It means that every state has the power of veto de facto. This is the most inclusive and enabling process for Israel, because the states are working on a model that Israel will be able to accept if Israel would choose to join. If Israel chooses to join this discourse, and Israel haven't agreed to join this discourse yet, Israel will have the power of veto, just like Iran, just like Egypt, just like Yemen. Every state in the zone has the power of veto, so no state is being singled out. The power of imagining a possible model was enabling states to imagining a possible model. And this is the power of civil society. So now the UN conference on the zone has taken place for 3 times now, 23 states from the zone, and that's a lot. Because we're only 24 states in the zone. But when people look at the Middle East, they think that there's Israel and the rest of the Middle East. But the Middle East is torn. And yet these states that usually agree on nothing were able to reach 3 times a final document by consensus. This usually doesn't happen. The NPT hasn't been able to get to such resolutions in the last years or final documents, but this conference has been. So what we see in the Middle East is one room where they all willing and able to talk about a topic that covers the most dangerous weapons, agreed on a layer of verifications and mechanism of compliance that will put them in strains, and yet they are doing so in goodwill. Now, you can't touch weapons of mass destruction without touching their mean of deliveries, meaning how do you carry these weapons of mass destruction? You carry them by missiles, by submarines, and by airplanes. It means that at one point, the states in the room will have to talk about other security issues. And when you talk about other security issues, you cannot touch human security. If these states are already in the room in solution-making atmosphere, and that's exactly the atmosphere in this room, then maybe we can expand this talk one day to other things that touch the topic of weapons of mass destruction. For example, nuclear energy. States in the zone are looking for nuclear energy, and as civil society, we think that this is a mistake. It enhances the stress, the regional stress, and it doesn't really give anything for climate change. However, we're a region with lots of sun, with collaboration, with real collaboration between states as started, we can actually start thinking about tackling issues that are issues that are rising because of climate change that have to do with security, because a lack of water. This is something that nuclear energy will harm, won't help, but solar energy will allow us to build more factories that cleaning seawater, desalination, I think it's called. I mean, once we have the states in the room, in our vision, now we have them talking about weapons of mass destruction, but it is civil society job to pave the way and the path for more regional discourse that will actually enhance peace, enhance human rights, and enhance human security in the zone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for really an uplifting message today. Something to get us thinking and excited for what's ahead in this segment here. Practical steps that we can all take, and of course the reminder of just how dangerous nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction are. So we're very happy to hear from you, and I honestly would love to hear even more and to keep the discussion going there, but we have a very packed schedule for here, so we will move on now to our next speaker, Ms. Petrosyan Hazmik. Please excuse me if I'm butchering the name there. And feel free to correct me here as well. But we're very glad to have you with us, coming from peace campaigns in Armenia. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts and contributions here. Please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. It was an important point. I am from Armenia, and I participated in peace camp. The peace was not discussed in the international level, and it was mainly before the war that happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh, between the Armenian forces living in Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan. And so today I'd like to speak a little bit concerning the peace itself, which is a concept a little bit unrealistic and imaginatory nowadays. First of all, even if it's being discussed in different platforms of the world, however, it turns out that in some countries may afford them to have peace in case other countries have no such opportunity, both in international levels and in their region. So the region of the South Caucasus region, where we have witnessed the huge atrocities against Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, has been for years one of the main burning points of international conflict, which is one of the parts where the interests of different states meet. So Armenia has always been for peace, and when in 2020, Azerbaijan launched the second large-scale war against Nagorno-Karabakh, we started to, Armenia made its best to restart the negotiations with Azerbaijan. However, even the main publicly documented cases showed that there was not only a war, but also the ethnic cleansing against national Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh. So when the conflict is turned to be going to have some elements of ethnic cleansing, it's hard to speak about peace because there is another goal. We see another goal of one of the conflicting parties, which has for aim not to. So the main goal is against some nationality and against some group of people, civilians mostly, who live there. So we witnessed a situation where Azerbaijan military forces were targeting only the civilians. They were targeting which 90% of the population of Karabakh was urged to and move to Armenia. Is that there was a goal, there was a strict plan to get the territories free of Armenian free of people of Armenian nationality. Of course, we had some ceasefire, but nowadays I would like to come to the situation where the negotiations are being continued both with different cooperating platforms. At the same time, it will be more than 1,000 Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh are in total blockade. Many people, civilians, are being killed there. Even people who are villagers who are working in their fields, they are being killed by Azerbaijani armed forces. And the issue of opening the corridor is not in the agenda of Azerbaijan because it has reclaimed the territory to be part of its territorial integrity. At the same time, it doesn't provide for protect, and in a situation where the main conflict between the issue that Azerbaijani Azerbaijani authorities started to realize their plan to get rid of Armenians living in all the territory of Azerbaijan, as a result of which they showed to all world that they are not able to protect the main human rights, which are such as right to life, right to get free of torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, etc. And the fact that the Nagorno-Karabakh wanted to get freedom was based one of the main international principles, which is the remedial cessation, and which has for aim to protect the national minority living in the territory of one state. So here we see the consequences of not considering the main ideas and main plans of Azerbaijan, the result of which now people are continuing to be killed. And even if in the international level the negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan continue, civilians are being killed almost every day. So my main message here is that we need to first of all have the will of the states to go to peace, and then hope for peace. Because if the state parties have no will to go to peace, it's almost impossible. In some countries, there has been an analysis which shows that there cannot be war between democratic countries. So if we make analysis of different war or conflict situations, it can be visible that if a state passes to democracy, it starts to negotiate for peace. So in 2018, Armenia had its peaceful revolution, after which our authorities started to work towards peace negotiation. Having freedom of speech in the society, we have also witnessed the societal demand to go and bring peace for the country. However, as we see that on the other side, there are other interests. There are also interests meeting from different states, and the population society of Azerbaijan has no voice to express himself, because no one wants war. It's not coming from the interests of general population to have war. So I strongly believe that if in one country there is freedom of speech and there is democracy, that country's main goal must to be developing its society members. So the war cannot be one of the agenda questions. So thank you once more for the invitation, and I hope I gave you my main idea.
Thank you so much, Hasmik. I very much appreciate your comments here and the need to have really states acting in good faith to pursue peace. I think this is a really important thing that we have to keep in mind, and the needs for ceasefires for humanitarian purposes, if nothing else. So I think we can take a lot from your message here and work with this throughout the rest of our session for today, and hopefully beyond that as well, to bring peace around the world, but in this case specifically in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Nagorno-Karabakh. So thank you so much for that. We will now quickly turn to a couple of short videos focusing on the Iraq War 20 years on. We had an event earlier this year with that main focus that wasn't quite 24 hours, but it was a good, I think, 6-hour event, if I'm not mistaken. And then afterwards, we will turn to Ismail Dawood, who will speak on the persistent problem of war and aggression from Iraq in 2003 to Ukraine in 2023.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and I represent California's beautiful 12th Congressional District, which includes Oakland, Berkeley, and parts of the East Bay in Northern California. I'm so pleased to be with you all today to commemorate your 2 decades of anti-war activism. 20 years ago, I opposed the Iraq War because I felt, and I knew then, it was built on a lie of weapons of mass destruction. You all share that understanding with me, and I'm grateful for our partnership to oppose militarism and war in the years since. 3 presidents have come and gone since Congress last voted to authorize the United States invasion of Iraq over 20 years ago, with the 4th now in office. Yet the legacy of these horrific forever wars live on in the form of the now obsolete authorization for use of military force resolutions. Just last week, I reintroduced once again legislation to repeal the 2002 AUMF alongside Representative Chip Roy, Abigail Spanberger, and Tom Cole, with Senators Tim Kaine and Todd Young leading the effort in the Senate. It's far past time we restore our constitutionally protected congressional war powers in a bipartisan fashion. Military action should be debated by the people's representatives in Congress as the Constitution intended, not unilaterally decided by any president without consultation. It's time we democratize our foreign policy and invest in diplomacy, development, and the needs of people before we exercise the military option, which is always there. 20 years on, this has been a bipartisan, bicameral effort. And with your help, we are going to get these AUMFs repealed this year and finally put an end to our forever wars. Thank you so much. Let's
sentence. For me, this February 15, 2003 was one of the greatest days in my peace life. When I was coming to the rally very early in the morning, I could not expect what happened during the day. You know, I was on the stage and the TV, which made a direct reporter that day, asked me if I can come to their TV room, and they showed me the different parts of Berlin. And the whole Berlin was totally overcrowded by protesters. I never saw this, and maybe never again. So it was a great day by the quality and the quantity of the people. We had the hugest and broadest coalition. But, you know, lessons learned. And I really would like to say one sentence to Barbara Lee, because it's the sentence of today. This is the courage to say, as the only person no in the House, this was a big, big steps. And you need courageous to do it. And today, in this opposition against the Ukrainian war, with these hateful speeches in media and politicians, you again need courage to be active against the war. And I'm happy that we can say that the peace movement is still active against the war in Ukraine. We criticize the illegal attack of Russia, but we know that only negotiations and ceasefire are the way out of these crises. And you know, we are in Berlin. We'll have on the 25th of February a big demonstrations. It will not so big like the demonstration in Italy some weeks ago, but it will be also a sign of hope. And I think peace movement always is a sign of hope. Politically, I think we should remember what's happened politically at that time. We had a peace coalition of governments. This was France, Germany, and Russia. And today we see that NATO and the United States destroyed totally this coalition, which is not a coalition of peace, but which is an alternative for the permanent going to war and destroying of countries and governments. So, and I think what is absolutely needed is, again, this coalition of peace under the umbrella of common security. And this is, for me, one lesson from that time till to today. The next point I really would like to mention, and this also shows that for me, the Ukrainian war, the picture for this Ukrainian war, which Russia was following, is also a little bit the behavior of the US in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Because the equality, they don't care about human rights, they don't care about international law, and they are always using this horrible story of double standards. And I think as peace movement, we deeply have to criticize the double standards. Last point I would say is the engagement. You know, we all are 20 years older, and we don't make the generation change. So we need a new generation of peace activists, and our job is to open this generation to come to the stage and to be the protest actions who hopefully will organize the next 15th of February 2032 or 28.
I remember I was a student doing my postgraduate program when the bombs fell on our heads in Baghdad. And that was in 1990, starting with Bush the father. I was not connected to the peace movement until I got a taste of those bombs and what it means that you are a mother of a baby, you are terrified, you don't know what to do with your family and with your older parents, and how it can come out of the blue and across the oceans that somebody decides to bomb your city, and there you are, you're in the middle of bombs. And it's a wake-up call that nobody can be safe if not involved in knowing what happens around the world. I don't like to use the words politics or democracy anymore, especially the word democracy is a terrifying word for us in Iraq. So that was my beginning. Then I became part of the anti-war movement, then got political awareness, then founded an organization for women. I called it Organization of Women's Freedom in Iraq. And from there on, and it continues. I hope I did.
Thank you. I'll immediately then turn the floor over to Ismail to follow up on that. Ismail, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending when you are, where you are. And I would like really, first of all, to thank all those people who participated in this peace wave. That means a lot to all of us. And a lot of thanks also to those who organized, first of all, this peace wave, and that for all the work that they did and they're gonna do also to make this reach as many as people as possible around the globe. So I was invited to share with you some thoughts, and actually I was thinking of the title, the persistent problem of war and aggression from Iraq 2003 to Ukraine 2023, because I personally come from Iraq, and I started my experience 20 years ago working with other peace activists to what we call building bridges of peace with people around the world. My experience started right after the war, and as a consequence of this brutal war on Iraq that have been cited also in the videos that we have seen before. At that time, the war in Iraq seems to be the war of the century. Today, after 20 years, I'm not even able to count all the wars that happened or took place after. I don't know. Sometimes I think about the war in Syria, Libya, Yemen, Sudan, Ukraine, and many other wars that it's even difficult to count all of them. So in daily work for peace and to prevent wars, many shocking facts and realities caused by war we've seen every day, every moment. But for a long time, the question that what would be the most shocking fact about these wars? And recently I started really to think about, and I want to share with you, that the fact that we are forgetting all these wars is the most shocking fact. We forgot all these wars. We forgot all these cost, human, environmental, our life, our wonderful countries that are destroyed by war. And this is continued not only for politicians and decision makers, but also as human beings. We are really struggling to remember all what have happened before. Otherwise, how can you explain after a pandemic, world pandemic, again a new war in Ukraine started by the Russian President Putin? I don't understand why we are not able to remember what happened before and not really being able to arrive to conclusion that most probably all these wars have been always been connected. I don't know if the war in Ukraine was possible if not the Russian intervention in Syria was not that heavy, or in Libya. I don't know if this logic of war have not been dominated since the war in Iraq. This logic, the same logic, is presented today. These are the same chain of war and aggression presented as a last choice to a geopolitical or internal conflict. And our voice as peace activists saying that, hey, stop, war should never be a choice, is always or being seen as a moment, as a reaction to an existing war, and not as a long-term choice. That have been said, so the fact that this is the last choice, that have been said before the war and aggression on Afghanistan, the war and aggression on Iraq, and it continues to be the reason or the excuse, let's say. So solving war to people, sometimes internally, sometimes externally, have been always using this as an excuse. And we arrive to a moment today where people saying we need more weapons, in order to reach peace in Ukraine. And in our experience in Iraq for 20 years of weapons, of war, now I cannot even count how many militias that have the effective control in Iraq. So are we sure more weapons in Ukraine would be the solution? Are we sure it's not the same logic that we have seen since years, presenting war and more war as the solution for geopolitical problem? War is nothing but a failure, our own failure, human society failure, to stop logic of aggression and war as a solution. We should really understand this and never forget about it. And this failure, let's say, of war, most probably will be also the destiny of Putin, his army, his mercenaries, and other war leaders. But we cannot even imagine who's saying this is not the right choice. So think with me, who are the countries that can speak about peace if they are already selling weapons to this very same conflict and saying that victory is the choice? They are saying the same thing that Putin is saying. And they are all these war actors, even those who are selling weapons and sending weapons, are not giving us a solution. They say victory is the solution. And everyone around a war and a conflict is thinking the very same logic of having a victory, so a war, waging a war, reaching his own geopolitical target, goal, and call it as the peace, because he wants to start talk about peace from that moment. And that's a big mistake. I know and I understand that there are some people who think that what would be the solution. In my opinion, we should think about this solution, not only for this war, always have in mind what would be the alternative. A nonviolent struggle for peace and justice, because there is, and I have heard before speakers speaking about peace without justice has not that meaning. And I do really agree that we should find peace and justice. So nonviolent struggle can be one of the options that we can develop and work on. We have always been, let's say, I would say, and myself, not courage enough to say war cannot be a solution, even if it's about our geopolitical interest, even if it's about our internal interest. And sending weapons and selling weapons is the same logic. So in the very conflict that is ongoing now in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Syria, everywhere, sending more weapons would mean more war crimes, more death, more risk of peace, of ending global life in this. We've heard also some colleagues speaking about nuclear weapons that are not so far from us as a threat to our lives. And this is really a sad moment. So I would think with you all about not sending weapons, but sending peace delegations, bombarding Russia with peace delegations, bombarding countries who are waging war with peace delegations, and sending people who speaks about peace, and having conferences who speaks about peace, and having peace protests. I'm really happy to see the video that had been shown before in my intervention, and it's really tells a lot, the mobilization in 2002 before the war on Iraq. But remember, this has been 20 years ago, and I am really sad that we cannot do such peace protests and peace initiatives around the world, like present, like that was that demonstration was present. And I do also think of all of your initiatives for peace, and I think they are part of what we are trying to reach to. So even small corner in a small city like Pisa, where I live now, where we are protesting against new military base, and it seems like, you know, nothing. It's nothing. Pisa is like a tiny city, and it's known for the Leaning Tower. It's known only as a touristic destination. So what does a base, military base, means there? It means a lot. It means using this lovely city as part of the war and aggression machine, that not necessarily for nowadays war, even if it's used for nowadays war, but also looking for future wars that would be more even risky, because it has started to be above each and every control, legal control or our human, let's say, observation control. So I find ourselves, all of us as activists and as society, is called to be against war whenever this war and wherever this war will take place, and never justify a war, never being part of justifying a war. And if a peace is not yet seen and recognized as a possible choice, it's only because we didn't invest enough in peace and nonviolence as tools for social and political change. And this is really not about what we are seeing now as a war. It's about the path for our future generations. So that's all the thoughts that I wanted to share with you, and I'm really happy to be able to do so. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ismail, for those great contributions. I think it's very important, as you said, that we remember history of these past 20 years and what has led us into this moment that we're here, and that weapons and wars cannot solve the world's problems, and indeed, in most cases, make them worse. So I very much appreciate all of your comments and encouraging words for the peace movements of these moments and how we can move forward from here. I would now then turn the floor to our next speaker. Again, forgive me if I don't say these names right. We are quite excited that we have a lot of new contacts who are joining us for this segment of the Peace Wave, but as a result, I'm not as familiar with the names, so if I get them wrong, correct me, please. But we have Laura Nader next, who is coming from Syria to speak a little bit of gender equality advocacy. And Laura is a highly dedicated gender equality activist from Syria who possesses extensive experience in training individuals on speaking skills. With a strong background in the educational sector as a lecturer, Laura actively addresses issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion, or EDI, within the workplace. Recognizing the need for a more proactive approach, she recently founded her own initiative with the goal of empowering professionals and providing them with the necessary tools to confront and combat inequalities within their circles. So Laura, I will give you the word now, please.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today, and thanks to my friend Imani. I'm so happy to be with you today. As you already know, peace isn't the opposite of war. Peace could be defined differently according to people's views on life. For me, peace is about the quality of life that people have. Peace is about equal rights and responsibilities for everyone. It's about people living a proper life, regardless of their gender, sexual orientation, disability, ethnic background. And that's my view on peace. As I view this topic as very important, I try to embed it in every speech I do, in my workplace, in my classrooms, everywhere. But I came to realize an issue, and I've heard about that from the young people especially. It is the fact that young people feel excluded. Young people have a lot to talk about. They have a lot of energy. They have causes they deeply believe in. Some young people talk about the climate change. Some young people talk about sustainability. Some young people talk about eradicating hunger. And they all share, let's say most of them share one issue. It's the fact that they don't have the proper tools to get their voices heard. They know a lot about the topic, but they don't know how to get their ideas across. So this inspired me to start my own initiative to help stop that. Another reason for why I started my own initiative, which could be seen as a peace-making initiative, is the fact that now the life of young people is all about social media. Bullying for a trend, hate speech for a trend are now very common. And that's also the issue that young people face, the fact that they can't stand up for themselves using proper words and tools as they don't have that knowledge. So for me, empowering youth to lead peaceful, equitable lives is about giving them those speaking skills. For me, the initiative would allow people to stand up for themselves, to advocate for greater causes through being able to speak in TED Talks or even behind their cameras. So I will be offering public speaking and debate skills, presentation skills training to young people, offering them all the tools that would empower them, give them the confidence they need to be able to speak up, that would know which type of voice tone to use when speaking about a certain topic, they would know how to attract their audience, how to pace their speeches, how if they are in a situation in which they are having a debate about those causes, and you know the Sustainable Development Goals have all of those complicated topics that could be greatly debated. So for young people, when having those debates, they would have all the techniques they need to use to deliver proper debates and advocate and get their ideas across and get heard and maybe hopefully gain a seat at the table of the decision-making process. So I would like to share with you, if possible, I will show you my website. Share screen. Yeah, so here is my website, and it's still, I can call it now my baby because it has only been launched a couple of weeks back. But I'm hoping that by launching this website, I would be able to give all the young people that need to have their voices heard the chance to have that. I would really appreciate if you can follow me on all of the social media platforms. If you are a young person, I encourage you highly to start your own initiative, just like I did, to use all the tools that you have, all the skills that you have, to share them with other young people, to empower them, to help them reach their own idea of the word peace. So please connect with me if you have any concerns, if you want to know more about my initiative, if I can help you with anything so that you can reach your own peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Laura, for showing us first off that everyone can have an initiative that is working for really a just peace. And of course, as you started with, peace is not just the absence of war, but really a presence of justice and something that we have to work towards in our daily lives, whether or not we are directly in war or conflict of sort, or whether it be other issues against peace on a variety of levels. So thank you very much for that. And I hope many of our listeners in both live and those who will watch the video in the coming days will check out your website and also be inspired by it to make their own positive changes. So with that being said, we will move to our next speaker. And I'm going to repeat again, just if I say the name wrong, correct me, please, so we can all learn from that. But we have a Mr. Akalaya Ratti from Georgia, who is a PhD candidate and lecturer at the University of Georgia. Akalaya, are you with us? Ratti, excuse me, Ratti, are you with us? Okay, I'm not receiving a response. I know that Ratti is in the Zoom call right now, but if you're unable to join us at the moment, I think we will first go to our next speaker and then try again. So next on the list here is another IPB council member we're very happy to have with us in this call, and whom we also must thank for, as some of the speakers have mentioned, helping us out to identify a lot of quite interesting and exciting peace activists from around the West Asia or Middle Eastern region. So Amani Aruri, are you with us? I know she is also traveling today, so it might be that Oh, okay. Amani, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm so sorry for the lagging connection.
No
Hello,
problem.
Shah.
Thank
Hello,
you.
everyone.
Hi.
Very happy to see you all, and very happy to hear from all of the outstanding peacemakers and activists from all over around the world. And I would like to share the message that we all share this together, and we have all the responsibility to work harder and harder towards achieving peace for our societies, for all of the unheard people, women, girls from all over the world. Okay, I can step back to give directly the floor, but
sorry, I just on my way, so
it's calling.
it was quite difficult to find a proper place for a video call, to make video call, so please forgive me. Okay, could I start?
Sorry, maybe just because of our order, Amani, would you like to continue, and then Rati, you will go right afterwards? Is that okay, or do you have limited time for us, Rati?
No matter, so it doesn't matter.
Amani, are you still with us? I think your video might be frozen. Okay, it seems she's dropped off for now. I know she's traveling, so the internet might not be good. So Rati, perfect timing, actually. We'll let you go ahead then, please.
Okay. So, dear colleagues, I am Rati Khalaya from Georgia, currently PhD researcher in European criminal law at the University of Georgia. It was a great honor and pleasure to have this opportunity to discuss the main challenges of my country nowadays. I mean, perhaps many of you are already informed about the Russian-Georgian conflict or the regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which goes back like 90s, from the 90s, the period of the dissolution or collapsing USSR. At the time, the Russian side effectively backed the separatists, but still formally recognized the two regions as independent countries. I mean, Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The second time when the red line was crossed by the Russian government and by the Russia, it was like in summer 2008. Shortly after the Bucharest summit, where Georgia was promised to be such kind of NATO member and get a map for future being candidate of NATO. And after that, the relationships between Georgia and Russia became especially tense and resulted in a 5-day war known as the August War. The military operations were terminated following the ceasefire agreement initiated by the French president. For the time, the president of France was Nicolas Sarkozy, who has arrived in Russia, I mean in the Moscow, and after that in Georgia, Tbilisi, and he was like such kind of mediator between Mikhail Saakashvili, for the time president of Georgia, and President Russia Vladimir Putin. And we have signed agreements, and after that they were ended, but it's still in the process. Following the conflict, reportedly about 30,000 persons faced long-term displacement. Ignoring the set out by the international humanitarian and human rights law and the provisions of 6-point ceasefire agreement, which I have already mentioned, that is the agreement between Georgia and Russia, mediated by Nicolas Sarkozy. The Russian side occupied the South Ossetian territory and recognized independence of South Ossetia together with another breakaway region of Georgia, Abkhazia. For the time, these two main parts of Georgia or separate states are recognized by Nauru. It's a quite small island in the Pacific Ocean, and by Syria also. So the international community overwhelmingly recognized the two territories as part of Georgia. I mean, the other developed countries, society. I mean, the main challenge for Georgia frame of the peace, it's like creeping occupation. The number of Russian troops in Abkhazia and South Ossetia steadily increased after the war. Before the war 2008, there were only 5,000 troops called themselves as peacekeepers. And after that, they increased amount of these troops, and we have about 4,000 troops in these regions. Abkhazia, the number of Russian troops become about also 4,000. The large presence of Russian troops in Georgia is the breakaway process, a Kremlin strategy that includes the installment of border guard stations, fences, and guarded wire to separate the occupied territories from the regions controlled by Georgia. So, as a conclusion, I may say that it's like you're living in one space, in one house, and maybe over the night you can find out that your house is now in occupied territory. So Russian troops are moving the borders, and they are spreading the territory of separatists. Georgian authorities claim that approximately 34 villages have been isolated by Russian forces. Artificially imposed physical barriers have divided not only privately owned gardens and grazing lands, but also communities. So, critical occasion became such kind of unstoppable everyday reality for those people who are now living on this part of Georgia. And Georgia itself has limited resources and unable to respond to the daily annexion of its territory without aggravating the situation. The process involved the violation of the human rights of the local population, as Amnesty International on its latest report states that Russian forces and the de facto authorities in the breakaway regions of South Ossetia continue to restrict movement across the de facto border, briefly fining dozens of people for illegal border crossing. One of the most famous, I may say, cases where about Georgian citizen Tatunashvili. He was who died while in custody when Tatunashvili's body was returned to his family for burial. It bore marks of torture, and autopsy revealed that it was missing several internal organs. So, according to the prosecutor's office of Georgia, the body of Tatunashvili had more than 100 injuries. Tatunashvili's case is part of new interstate application being lodged by Georgia against Russia before the European Court of Human Rights. While the international community continues to firmly support the sovereignty and integrity of Georgia within its international recognized borders, as I have mentioned, there are several and not so less cases, I may say, that are quite relevant, and sometimes it turns out that some Georgian citizens are just murdered by Russian troops. So we think, not me, but all the Georgian citizens think that there must be taken some kind of immediate creation of effective international mechanisms to defend these people who are living nearby to conflict zones. I think that was my speech for today. I think you would like it. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you so much, Rati, for giving us really personal insights into the situation in Georgia in these moments and the difficulties, but also the possibilities for solutions for the conflict that's ongoing. So That's very much appreciated. As mentioned, if you have questions for Rati, you can write them into the chat here, and I think Rati can also answer them directly in the chats as we are running on a pretty tight schedule. However, if we do in the end have a little time at the end, we would of course be happy to open up for Q&A if the time allows. Otherwise, Rati, I hope we can follow up more with you as well moving forward here. Oh, it seems we are now seeing your screen. Unfortunately, it wasn't there before, but also if you'd like to send it to us, Rati, we will make sure to pass it around to any participants who would like to.
I have made a little presentation, but it's not presentation. It's like some main headlines from popular news makers. So maybe it would be like interesting to read them if someone wants to get some more information about Georgian-Russian conflict. So.
Excellent, thank you so much. Yeah, and please feel free to post that into the chat as well, so people can download it directly there. Or if it's easier, you can send it to us by email, and we will make sure anyone who's interested can email us at info@ipb-office.berlin, and I'll also post that in the chat, and then we can share that presentation with those who are interested.
In this conclusion, I would just do it one sentence. Nowadays, I understand it's quite normal that all the focus is on Ukraine, but before Ukraine, we were occupied by Russia, so it was like 15 years ago. So the second time, and the first time it was like 30 years ago. So I think this impact of Ukraine's war could get some benefits. I understand it's not so good, but maybe could get some benefits for Georgia also.
Absolutely, thank you. And yes, we hope while the attention is mostly on Ukraine now, that people will not forget about Georgia and make sure that we can also bring peace in Georgia. So thank you. We do have to move on because we are on a tight schedule here. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now try again with Amani. Hopefully the connection is a bit better now. Amani, please.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, I'll try to be quick so that not take time of others for the questions. First of all, I would like to reiterate on what has been said about the peace and the prerequisites for peace. It was mentioned by different speakers, thanks to all of them, that peace cannot be achieved without justice. Peace cannot be achieved without respecting the values of human rights. And I would like to emphasize here that peace building, it's like, for me, it echoes for me two words: peace by itself. It's like the ultimate goal that we are seeking for as peace builders, as activists, as nationalists. And the other one is building. And for building, we need solid foundation. We need really a solid ground to have a strong building and strong result. Unfortunately, from what we are witnessing all over the world, from what we are seeing, the building is not yet ready to be built because we don't have solid foundation. We tend to talk about peace without referring to human rights. We tend to separate peace agenda from the human rights agenda, which is something really catastrophic, because sometimes I feel like, we live in a very ambitious, with very ambitious goals and dreams that could not be achieved. Because for me, for example, let me focus my presentation or my intervention on the implications on women, as I'm a gender equality activist as well, and I'm focusing on the intersectionalities between conflict, gender, and other also identities that interplays with each other to create more and more vulnerabilities and to create more complications for specific group of people in specific contexts. So for me, when I think about peace as a woman, as a peace builder, as an activist, I would like to be part, and my goal is to be part of peace building efforts at the official level, being part of negotiation, being part of dialogue talks, and being part of democratic process. But this is almost like impossible in a context in the context where I come from. I come from Palestine, and in Palestine, as many of you know, we are living really a reality of lack of peace and existence of peace, lack of respect or almost no respect of fundamental freedoms and basic human rights. When we talk about human rights, we are talking first of all at the right to life. Only yesterday, my friend and I, as we came to Strasbourg to study about human rights in a very well-known institute, and we were going for a trip because herself and I, we feel so tired, we feel so exhausted from the the efforts that we are making as activists, the pressure we are living, the intimidations even, and the threats even that we receive as peace activists, as women, as non-protected civilians, also not by a government, not by other organizations. We were staying in the Eiffel Tower, and it was a dream for myself to be in Eiffel Tower. But I found myself crying while being there, and I didn't feel like, it is something fun anymore, because I received the news of the killing of my brother's best friend, who spent most of his childhood with my brother. So this is our life. And for us, we really, this context, we can't really dedicate our attention and our focus on moving forward, to keep doing these efforts to achieve our ultimate goals. Currently, the situation in Palestine is getting worse and worse, especially with what was funding for militarization of the agenda also that can be only described by double standard, because there is no there to talk about these violations against Israel. There's no will to hold accountability of Israel for the violations of human rights. There's always sessions and talks held in the top level platforms, including Security Council, Human Rights Council, and other platforms. But the action on ground is almost zero, because the Israeli military regime is continuing to exercise its violations on ground. And recently, with the right-wing extremist government, with the existence of people in the government like Ben Gvir, for example, and Bibi Netanyahu, who are calling for militarizing settlers, even civilians, Israeli civilians, and giving them the green light to open fire at any Palestinian who is suspicious for them. And of course, for all of the settlers, Palestinians are suspicious because they simply came and stole their lands, the Palestinians' lands. They destroyed their houses, they burned their houses, and they established instead settlements outposts. Only last week, in a village just like 5 minutes away from my village in the West Bank, a group of settlers, they attacked the village of Safa. They burned at least 50 houses while the families were inside, while children were inside. And when the other youth from surrounding villages came to protect these children and to help them get out of their houses that are burning, some of them were killed and many of them were injured. For the first time also after the second intifada since 2000, the Israeli forces used airstriking in West military operation, more than 12 persons were killed in one day. And this is happening alongside also the resistance from the Israeli civil society working on human rights and working against occupation for the 20. They have been protesting what is called the legal reforms, which is like a destruction of judiciary system of Israel, destroying the democracy that is already non-existing because of the extremist right-wing government. But also when it comes to judiciary, the current attempts is to destroy the independence of judiciary and to have the government control everything, even including judiciary. So there is increasing efforts committed by civil society, but on the Israeli side, the civil society is being choked with the shrinking space, with imposing more than 30% taxes on non-governmental organizations receiving funding from foreign donors, with calling activists for interrogation, them in prison, and for organizations were designated as terrorist organizations, and they were forced to close their activities. So this is also affecting the ability of civil society to transfer and to share the reality. Civil society and to the peace situation, deterioration of human rights situation. There and this peace wave and peace work, peace building has their own responsibility, has their own mission also to share with people of other nations living under oppression, living under occupation, under wars, under conflict. So we need to hold accountability for duty bearers at all levels, the national, international, and regional levels, to commit to their obligations, to keep peace and to promote peace as well, and to promote the respect of human rights, and it's specific to the international community to commit to the peace agenda and human rights agenda that was set collectively, and the standards of these human rights were agreed upon to be the right of everyone, every human being on earth, without any prejudice, without any discrimination on any basis. So it's time to stop all of these violations. It's time to human rights respect, and to achieve self-determination for all nations, because this is a right of all nations, and there should for the futures of the whole generations. There should be justice and consideration to all these power dynamics, because when we talk about militarization, it shouldn't be the fact that because group of people is not militarized, is not armed, can be easily oppressed and can be deprived of their human rights, of their right to live in a peaceful life. And here comes the obligations and responsibilities of the international community, of different mechanisms to put an end to the impunity of these perpetrators, to the impunity of these who are depriving and breaching all of the international law, breaching all of the rights that are granted by default to all human beings. I would like also to ask civil society organizations and actors and the human rights defenders to keep up this mission and to advocate not only for their causes, but also for the other causes they share with, because it's a collective responsibility. It's a collective mission. And of course, we can be stronger when we stand together. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to hear from all of you, and I'm really looking forward to be working with all of you and to hear the voices that you are also trying to elevate.
Thank you so very much, Amani, for shedding light into some of the recent events in Palestine, focusing on the need for the right of self-determination of peoples around the world, and for providing us some hope as well, especially for the younger generations to make some change here. We are down to our last few minutes of this segment of the Peace Wave, and we have one more speaker, so I will move on to them. And that is Miss Mariam Hamaidi. Again, please correct me if I'm saying the names wrong. And she will be speaking about the Sahrawi youth against occupation. Mariam, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm online. So thank you. First of all, I will take this opportunity and thank all the organizers of this Peace Wave event. So I'm Mariam Hamaidi from Africa's Last Colony. I'm participating on behalf of Sahrawi Youth Against Occupation group. We are working to highlight our just cause, as well as to break the media blackout on Sahrawi people who have been suffering from the injustice of occupation for more than 50 years. I and my group members have created videos explaining the question of Western Sahara issue from cultural and political aspects. So we want you to watch them by your hearts, not by your eyes. From this place, we would like to say that Sahrawi people don't demand charity, they demand their legitimate right to freedom, which will get one day. These people who have been fighting with their women, men, and children, despite the failure of the international communities and the silence of some nations, will continue on their freedom path. So I don't want to take more of your time, so let you with the following video, and thank you for your attention.
Western Sahara, known as Africa's last colony in the modern era. The area of Western Sahara is 260,000 kilometers. Its inhabitants are called Sahrawis.
For centuries, Sahrawis were nomadic tribes living in the Saharan desert. They used to travel freely across the desert, searching for the best pasture lands and water for their goats and camels.
In 1885, at Berlin Conference, Europe divided the African continent. Each European country received its parts, and Spain took the area known today as Western Sahara. Africa was divided by improvised borders. Those who once were free nomadic tribal families became prisoners of artificial boundaries and suppressed by a colonial power.
Spain, likewise the other colonial rules, began to exploit the local natural resources. In 1963, Spain discovered the largest phosphate reserve in the world. For decades, Sahrawis peacefully coexisted with the Spanish rulers, but in 17th, nationalist movement arose across Africa. Sahrawis began to feel that Western Sahara was their land and their nation.
In 1973, a group of Sahrawi youth, commissioned by Sahrawi people, established the Popular Front for the Liberation of Sagi al-Hamra and Wadi al-Dhahab, called the Polisario Front. They adopted the armed struggle for Spanish colonialism.
Back then, the United Nations was involved in the decolonization process of all African countries. Spain was forced to leave Western Sahara and began to negotiate independence with the Sahrawis. But the Moroccan King Hassan II claimed that the territory was and will always be a part of Morocco. In 1975, as a Spanish dictatorship Franco was dying, while Hassan II organized the Green March, invading the Sahrawi territory with 350,000 civilians and 25,000 soldiers. Meanwhile, the Moroccan regime, supported by France, signed the Madrid Tripartite Agreement with Spain and Mauritania, with the purpose of dividing Western Sahara. Spain handed over the administration of Western Sahara, but never relinquished its sovereignty. The Polisario Front continued its war against the Moroccan occupation. During this war, the Moroccan occupation used many internationally prohibited weapons supported by France and Israel, such as phosphorus and napalm bombs, to kill and exterminate the Sahrawis in many massacres.
In 1981, supported by US, France, and Israeli occupation, Morocco began to build a 2,700-kilometer continuous wall of shame, which includes more than 8 million of bombs, and divided Western Sahara and Sahara people into two separated parts.
As soon as the Cold War was over, the US decided to end this war. In 1991, both parties approved a peace plan organized by the UN with only one condition: that referendum will take place in which of the Sahrawis should decide the future of Western Sahara. The Moroccan regime trained Moroccan settlers on Sahrawi language, customs, and cultures to include them in the Sahrawi census. Up to date, Morocco hasn't let the United Nations sponsored referendum to take place. For the last 30 years, the US and France have always supported Morocco and the UN to avoid the peace plan to be completely achieved. The situation has led to the status quo. Half of the Sahara population wait for a peaceful solution in the refugee camps in Algeria, while the other half remain in the occupying territories under Moroccan occupation.
Almost 2 years ago, Morocco violated the ceasefire agreement signed in 1991. The war between Morocco and Polisario Front began again. It continues until now. The United Nations hasn't yet taken any serious position regarding the right of Sahrawi people to self-determination, which has been waiting for more than 30 years, and the Moroccan occupation hasn't been condemned despite its violation of international law.
So we have to apologize. We ran a little bit behind schedule. We had another video of Western Sahara that we would have loved to show, but we are at the limit of our 2-hour block for now. However, we will share the other video as well by email to all registered peoples, so that you'll have the opportunity to watch that and learn more and stand in solidarity with the people of Western Sahara. So thank you very much to all of our speakers for this 2-hour segment. I think we covered a large range of issues. A special thank you as well to Mariam here at the end. And now we have 2 hours left of the Peace Wave, one final segment in which we are again moving westward to cover Central and Eastern Europe, as well as parts of Central and Eastern Africa. I will turn the floor over to Lisa Clark, who will lead that section in just 1 second. But first, we will stop our recording and